Welcome to this session. This session will cover institutional framework for FSM. I am Dr. Parwez Akhtar, Assistant Professor, Department of Civil Engineering, Manipal University. I have my expertise on environmental hydraulics and computational river mechanics. The broad objective of this session is to be able to identify important management aspects that needs to be incorporated in an institutional framework. To understand regulations and contracts that can be used to ensure effective fecal sludge management. To understand the strength and weakness of stakeholders' role in institutional frameworks, to obtain an overview of potential institutional arrangements for the distribution of responsibilities in the service chain, and finally to understand the main advantages and drawback of different institutional arrangements. For the successful implementation of fecal sludge management system, an institutional framework need to be developed based on the specifics of the local situation. The focus of the FSM service chain in this session is collection and transport, treatment, and end use or disposal. The service chain depends on an effective management system. Laws and strategies need to be clearly defined, including regulating and enforcing the roles and responsibilities of each stakeholder throughout the entire service chain. The comprehensive approach, incorporating multiple levels of institutional aspects, requires a strong commitment by the government that is linked to their sanitation policy, including on-site sanitation in the short, medium, or long term. Therefore, the FSM institutional frameworks require dedicated funding and training strategies. The institutional framework is defined by the laws, contracts, and regulatory documents that determine the relationship between the stakeholders involved in FSM, and it defines the organization of the entire service chain. The session focuses on institutional aspects that ensure the sustainable management of the service chain in three sections, namely success factor, enabling regulation environment, and the institutional arrangement. A well-designed institutional framework for fecal sludge management invariably depends upon its success factors, enabling regulatory environment, and institutional arrangement. The selection of a FSM institutional framework must be driven by local socio-economic, climatic, and environmental contexts, taking into account existing sanitation infrastructures, institutions, and planning procedures. Important factors for success that need to be considered when defining an institutional framework will be discussed here. These factors can be considered as objectives for the different stakeholders concerned, for example, managers, politicians, practitioners. The implementation of these objectives depend on the local context. For example, the coordination of the local stakeholders will require more effort if several private companies are in charge of different activities than if they are organized in association. All these objectives can be reached in a stepwise process, with more aspects being integrated as the local experience increases. Priority level given to FSM. The political prioritization of FSM and its implementation through regulation, financial resources, incentive, and organizational effort is the main enabling condition for the system's sustainability and efficiency. If it is not a priority of the national and or local government as part of its overall sanitation program, then comprehensive, effective, and safe FSM is unlikely to develop. Coordination of the stakeholders. The identification and coordination of stakeholders is crucial to get their input and commitment. To ensure this happens, frequent meetings or workshops should be organized. The incentive and enforcement strategy must also be clearly defined. Committees and associations can be created to simplify the communication between the stakeholders. For example, organizing workshops for all the separate private collection and transport companies requires more time and investment than if they are represented by an association. Incremental solution can be adapted to facilitate the involvement of stakeholders. For example, based on the initial involvement and skill of the stakeholders, coordination committee can first be organized with the different departments of the government involved, such as public works, health, environment, and then expanded to include the private sector. The coordination work can be conducted by NGOs, governments, or through association at each step in the service chain. Response to the need of the whole area and population. The system must address the sanitation needs of the entire population at affordable prices. Collection and transport service should be available for all types of on-site technologies and infrastructure in the entire city area, including in densely populated area. Financial, environmental, and social sustainability. The institutional framework should ensure long-term financial viability. Financial mechanisms such as subsidies can be implemented to provide access to repair shops for collection and transport operators. This can be used to ensure no spillage happens during the transportation. Also, agriculture area can be established near the FSTP if compost is produced, or subsidies can be given to the industries that are able to use the treatment end product. As fuel coordination committee or associations can be involved in the monitoring of these aspects. Awareness raising and information dissemination. Efficient communication on the advantages of the FSM system on public health and the environment has a positive impact on public acceptance. Development of local expertise. Collaboration with local universities, NGOs, research centers, and institutions from other countries will contribute to the emergence of local expertise. A specific curricula on FSM should be developed in training centers as part of the sanitation courses. Universities and government should be involved in the implementation of new. Project coordination meeting with university and research institute from 5 countries together with the National Sanitation Utility in Dakar, Senegal is depicted for illustration. Coming to enabling regulatory environment, it has different components such as human and environmental health, overall sanitation strategy, city-wise approach, complete service chain, enforcement, permits and licenses, and finally coordination. The national authority needs to be involved in the development, validation, and dissemination of an array of policies, strategies, laws, and standards that define the stakeholders' roles, the quality standard, the procedure, and the penalty. Private sector stakeholders must also be taken into account when defining the regulations, as they may offer more cost-effective services and often fill the gaps between demand and government ability to supply the services. Aspects that should be considered in developing regulatory text will be discussed subsequently. The first one is human and environmental health. The measures needed to protect human and environmental health from risk linked to FSM need to be clearly laid out by the regulations. This includes storage, transfer, and treatment infrastructures, protective equipment for employees working in contact with FS, and measures to avoid discharge into the environment then comes. Overall sanitation strategy. To ensure an integrated approach, a strategy for the management of sanitation services needs to be defined. and should include FSM and wastewater management. This includes the existing on-site sanitation technologies and the FS quantities. Also, future strategy for the provision of sanitation at the household level need to be coordinated with FSM and wastewater management. Similarly, enforcement issue is also important. Regulation needs to be enforced at both national and subnational or city level by separate decrees, decisions, standards, and guidelines defining the rules and potential penalties for the aspects such as the authorized stakeholders for each steps of the service chain, their roles and obligation, and the mechanism responsible for the monitoring and enforcement of each activity. The required design and construction standard for the on-site sanitation technologies and the treatment infrastructures. The authorized road and traffic rules for collection and transport. The authorized site for treatment and disposal. The access and discharge condition for the treatment, resource recovery, and disposal sites, such as opening hours, tariffs, the required standard for service and products, and the required enforcement and monitoring output. Institutional arrangement may a number of aspects such as overview of the service chain organization, role distribution among the stakeholder, institutional arrangements for collection and transport, institutional arrangements for treatment of fecal sludge, institutional arrangements for end use and disposal. An schematic presentation is presented here for different organizational arrangements for distribution of operational responsibilities among stakeholders. One block here you can see is represented one stakeholder. The selection of one of the discussed arrangements depend on the characteristics of the local stakeholders, and it comes under role distribution among stakeholders. For example, a small private company might not be structured enough to manage the entire service chain as described in option 8. You can just refer the figure which has been given in the previous slide. Thus, the feature of each stakeholder must first be understood and then the institutional system defined. In most of the currently existing system, a combination of stakeholders tends to provide service in the FS service chain. For example, sanitation utility, municipal services, military department, private entrepreneurs, group of economic interest. Table shown in slide summarize the possible responsibilities of stakeholders. They may take charge of one or more activities within the service chain. Different stakeholders in the fecal sludge sector and their possible involvement at different levels of the fecal sludge organization is presented here for more clarity. Institutional arrangement for collection and transportation is also very important. Different types of stakeholders can be in charge of the collection and transport with or without transfer stations. Natural or governmental, municipal utilities or private companies can undertake either collection at the on-site technology or transport to the treatment plant and combined transport and treatment activities. CBOs commonly have a weaker management structure and are best involved in collection at a local level. Similarly, institutional arrangements for treatment of fecal sludge should also be considered on priority basis. FSTPs are important technical infrastructures that require adequate training of the personnel responsible for their management, O&M, and monitoring. All treatment technologies need to be managed by well-organized and effective institutions. Therefore, CBOs are not recommended as the high level of technical and managerial skills required are often not available in these organizations. The institution in charge of treatment can either own the property and infrastructures or have some type of public-private partnership (PPP). Different arrangement can exist, such as direct management by national or municipal utilities, direct management by private companies, and delegated management by national or municipal utilities or private companies. And again, institutional arrangement for end use and disposal is also important and warrant due attention. The institutional framework need to promote sustainable business model for the entire service chain. Therefore, good quality end product must be ensured, which must also be safe to use. Similarly, for the treatment of FS, resource recovery from the end products can require a high level of skill for O&M and monitoring depending on the choice of the technology. The product not only need to be sanitized and processed, but they also need to be of value to the local market. This requires a preliminary assessment of the market demand, proper marketing, and the provision of a high quality of service. A multi-barrier approach should also be adopted to protect the workers, customers, and final users from health risks linked to the pathogens. Receiving fecal sludge at the treatment plant, institutional framework need to be developed for that also. Two types of management structures can be followed: direct or delegated. In the case of delegated management of publicly owned infrastructures and equipments, licenses are useful to define the O&M requirement, the quality standard, and the monitoring program. Three types of stakeholders may be in charge of these activities. The first one is national or municipal utilities. A complex process can be managed by a national or municipal utility only, which could also deliver the end product to customers. Where national or municipal utilities are in charge of the resource recovery plant, they are also likely to be involved in the FSTP management, either through direct or delegated management. Second one is private companies. Small private companies providing services for resource recovery from waste and treatment end product are found worldwide. The main strengths are related to the inherent dynamism of private entrepreneur. Capacity strengthening and close coordination of private companies are often needed to ensure efficient management and O&M of the facilities. Contract or agreement can be signed with the stakeholder in charge of the FSTP O&M in order to define the agreement as well as the price and quality of the end product to be processed and marked. Apart from different aspects for developing institutional framework for FSM is FSM, which has been discussed, associations and CBOs are also to be considered. CBOs are associations or association can be involved if the technology used to process, treat, and package the end product is low, and if customers come to the plant to buy the products. This solution may be applicable where people are living near to the FSTP, especially if end products are used directly in the community. The management rules of a CBO stipulated the needs for sustainable O&M and transparent financial transaction, and therefore licenses can be provided by local authorities. As for the collection and transport processes, the activities linked to the resource recovery can be carried out on demand or based on a contractual agreement outlining a scheduled sale for delivery. Where valuable end products can be produced over the entire year, the main advantage of the scheduled sale is the provision of a regular income that can be used for the O&M of the infrastructure. Thank you.